There were rumors that a madman was walking around the battlefield, most likely a mercenary with lifeless eyes. After all, as soon as the battle ends, he disappears and goes in search of a new battle. Yes, a mercenary with no attachment to life is so strange, and this madman always says that he survived again, after every battle. It's also rumored that he always appears in battles that have something to do with the Empire, so he seems to be driven by something more personal than money. The guys who were sitting in the inn and discussing this warrior got goosebumps from these words, wondering who this madman was. Though from the words, he's probably a prince of some ruined kingdom. They say he's looking for a place to die, and all he can think of is attempting suicide. The third prince of Betrayal, Yuri Betrayal, was the name of the madman who sought the battlefield. Yuri Betrayal is the name of one dishonorable man who destroyed the kingdom with his own hands. 10 years ago, the 18-year-old third prince of Betrayal was gambling large sums of money in a casino. No one present in this casino did not understand how he managed to win every time, and always with a very small margin. Yuri every time denied and said that he always does not care about the game. This time Yuri wanted to double the bet, but the royal magician, Hernando, asked him to leave early. Hernando knew that if they stayed here long enough, they might be late for the meeting. Besides, Yuri was already getting threats. Why didn't he just leave while everyone else was being nice? Everyone playing at that table had already realized that Yuri was cheating and started to accuse him of it. It was clearly not a fair game. But these words pissed Yuri off. Who do they all think he is? The other players said that given his behavior, he wasn't a nobleman. Maybe he was a king of some country or something. Although if he was a member of the royal family, they wouldn't have sent Yuri away so easily, another player thought. Yuri was already getting on the Empire's nerves by building up tension in the war. All princes are the same, just like their fathers. How does it feel to be a useless son? Yuri stood up and threw the cards in the others' faces. What can people who can only swing swords do? Yuri called everyone else a bunch of idiots, because he is the third prince of Betrayal, and these guys will be reborn today, thanks to his kindness. After a while, Yuri stood in front of Princess Katerina of the Empire and excused himself, saying that he was late because his father had an urgent conference. He had already told the girl all this through the sphere of communication when they had talked before. Katerina convinced Yuri that it was hard for him to find time for all of this. He didn't even realize how long it took the girl to get here, avoiding the gazes of passers-by. Yuri told her that since her father wasn't at his post right now, he should be careful. He shouldn't have told anyone anything at all. So she was nobody to Yuri? Katerina asked the boy nervously. If Yuri didn't trust the girl, then why had he told her everything? He could have told some other woman he trusted more. Katerina didn't want to talk to Yuri anymore, and asked him not to talk to her again until she allowed it. The girl tore off her necklace from her neck and threw it at Yuri's feet. It was more of a protest or a grudge against the prince for the words he had said. Katerina turned around and quickly left the meeting place. Yuri picked up the necklace and, realizing what he had done, looked at the necklace in his hands. He didn't know what to do next. He realized that this time it would be much harder to make amends than in the past. He didn't know that someone was watching their meeting in the alley around the corner. From that day on, their relationship had gotten even worse, the ties between Betrayal and the Empire reaching their limits. The Empire's actions were just a usual provocation, which gradually began to go beyond the limits of permissible. Eventually, the conflict between the countries began to gain momentum, and the Empire invaded Betrayal. As a result of the Empire's invasion of Betrayal, an official war with the Empire began. All the people in the castle had to evacuate, and the castle was burned to the ground. After ages and countless casualties, the war that seemed like it would never end was still going on. During the war, Yuri's older brother Joshua died, and reinforcements never arrived. The powerful force of Betrayal, and the one people called the strongest on the continent, was Betrayal, only for the absence of one man. The course of the war was gradually turning towards the Empire. At first, Yuri thought it was just a simple coincidence and ignored it. Perhaps Yuri was just denying a reality he didn't believe in. But thoughts of past battles he had fought in which he had risked his life and his rational thinking led him to one conclusion. Katerina had betrayed them all. She was the only one Yuri had told. The moment Yuri's father left Betrayal, the ruthless invasions from the Empire began. The prince hoped that this strange coincidence would end up being just a coincidence. But the answer to the letter he barely had time to send to Katerina was the word, sorry. Yuri received nothing but disappointment. That night, when the Empire attacked Briol and Yuri's older brother was killed, the Imperial soldiers found the prince himself. If they had captured Yuri, Briol would have been finished. The prince fought off the Imperial soldiers for a very long time, but there was no end to them. The boy killed his foes one by one, piercing into the fight again and again. He fends off a powerful blow and catches his opponent's gaze, tensely fixing his attention before the next decisive lunge. He parries the enemy's powerful lunge. Yuri focused, muscles tense, preparing to strike back with a deadly blow. Yuri clenched his teeth, drops of sweat rolling down his face and his eyes, a clear flame of determination. He is ready to fight to the last breath. He makes a powerful swing of his sword, tossing the enemy aside in a crisp motion, armor shattered. Yuri doesn't give a slack even in the flames of battle. He delivers a disconcerting blow backwards, collapsing the enemy to the floor. In flying sparks and a loud sound, Yuri's absolute control is at the epicenter of the battle. Yuri turns around sharply as more enemies appear behind him, their shadows against the fire making him tense momentarily. With honed ferocity and a cold smirk on their faces, the Empire warriors slowly approached Yuri, as if sensing easy prey. Yuri froze with a drop of sweat on his cheek. He realized that this time it would be much harder to get out than before. Yuri lowered his gaze heavily to the ground. Apparently this is how it would end. No pathos, just in the dust and cracks of the stone. The prince burst into a rage, with one powerful blow chopping the enemy in the air with a whistle of steel and a cry of pain. Yuri freezes for a moment, the sword flying out of his hands, and the enemy has already drawn his blade over him. Everything hangs in the balance, and suddenly, like thunder in the midst of the battle, the enemy falls. From behind his sword pierces Roland, who appeared at the most critical moment. Roland, collapsing in front of the enemy, clenched his teeth in pain and, gathering his last strength, asked the prince to flee and save her highness. The Prince of Betrayal froze, his eyes filled with rage and pain, his heart as if torn by a name he didn't want to lose. The wounded prince is tried to be taken away from the battlefield, and the panic-stricken soldier begs him to retreat, for the fate of all Briol depends on him. The Prince of Briol gritted his teeth, but his gaze was full of pain. He knew he had to leave now, even if he didn't want to. His cloak fluttered behind him as Prince Briol rushed away behind him. There were shouts of enemies ordering him to capture the fleeing man. Morning had come. Sunlight was breaking through the foliage, and a squad of enemies was scouring the neighborhood, determinedly insisting he couldn't go far. The Prince of Briol, taking shelter in a warehouse, sat in the shadows of the crates, his heart pounding in his ears, but he knew that hiding was no longer an option. With a tear on his cheek and a look full of despair, the prince realized he would need a miracle to break through and survive this chaos. The prince thought about his father, who never came back, and in the back of his mind, Yuri began to realize that he was probably finished. Out of the darkness of the warehouse, the door suddenly opened, and in a beam of light, a soldier appeared in front of the prince. The stranger's face was calm, but unpredictable. Yuri dropped to the floor, breathing heavily as the soldier slowly approached. A thought flashed through his mind. If he died here, Briol would fall with him. The Prince of Briol knelt down, clenched his fists and lowered his head, biting his lip. He asked for mercy for the first time, to survive for the sake of the country. Clenching his fist to the point of trembling, the prince remembered the knights of Briol that had fallen for him. His voice trailed off, but he still tried to say something. While the prince was on his knees, the soldier calmly pronounced the sentence, "The Empire will pay for all its sins, and there will be no mercy." The soldier, disobeying orders, let Prince Briol go, allowing him to escape before the Imperial troops arrived. The Prince of Briol rushed through the forest, exhausted but determined to escape at all costs. The prince clenched his teeth in pain and anger. The only goal in his heart was to survive, to restore Briol and punish the Empire. However, it was all nothing but childish bravado, but the reality was cruel. In the end, everyone died. What was the meaning of all this bloodshed? The guy couldn't even think of a reason for it all. Yes, Yuri took up the sword to punish himself. Someday there would be someone who could kill him. After a while, it was rumored that the guy was looking for a place to die. Come to think of it, that's why he's so eager to fight in the most dangerous battles. He's constantly making reckless accusations just to get a break, and all he can think of is suicide attempts. He's obsessed with himself to the very end. But death is too good an ending for the likes of Prince Yuri. Anyone who knows his past is already long dead. This time a knight stood in front of Yuri with the look of a man who wants to kill him. He said that everything that happened to him was done for the sake of Yuri and his family. The knight in dark armor with burning eyes claims that the prince is the one responsible for everything. In the whispers through his helmet and in the disfigured face, Yuri unmistakably recognizes Roland as someone he once knew, but he was dead then. The reason Betrayal fell at the hands of the Empire was because of the oath of honor of the Flanders family, who had served the royal family all along. Because of this, Roland's dignity and faith crumbled overnight, so the one who died long ago came back as a ghost, just to challenge his mistakes and his sins. Yuri thought he'd feel better when he died, but that damn guilt pressed down on him even in the last moment of his life. The Betrayal heir will never give up his honor, even after death. Yuri remembered his father's words before his death. Yuri woke up to his father's call in his bed. He was just a boy. His father chewed over him. He hadn't opened his eyes for 3 days. The boy didn't understand how his dead father could be here by his side. He thought he had gone to hell. But what was his father doing here? For a man who spoke so much about honor, he had lived a very tolerable life. The father, after these words, gave the boy a slap on the back. What kind of nonsense he was talking. The boy asked his father if even in hell he could not get rid of this habit. Suddenly in the window, Yuri saw a beautiful day and people walking in the garden. But how? If this is hell, then there must be sinners here and a terrifying flame of purification. The devil should be torturing him and mocking him, but it's different here. Wait, but if it's not hell, then he's in heaven. No, it can't be, Yuri thought, and passed out again. At first, Yuri thought it was a dream or a lingering memory from his mind. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't wake up or see the end of the world. Instead, the old memories lying in the back of his mind kept repeating themselves. He couldn't help but recognize the fact that he had gone back in time, to the spring of that year, when he had turned 13, and the fact that he had gotten another chance pleased him greatly. It was another morning in the past, and Yuri, who had returned to the past, decided to train to hone his swordsmanship. He couldn't let everything happen again. When he got up, he asked the maid to quickly give him his clothes, or rather his shower stuff. The girl tried very hard to calm the young prince down. He should at least wash his face first. The boy began to remember how his maid Ina died. He saw the girl's bloody body lying there. Just then he turned to her and asked her to slap him. No 3 savory slaps. But to the girl, it was treason. Yuri started to assure Ina that it wasn't treason if he asked to do it himself. He is Yuri Betrayal, after all. He must keep his once-spoken vow. After a while, the boy with a swollen cheek from the slaps stood outside and practiced. He had forgotten that Ina was very strong. Yuri found it very strange that no one even offered to apply any ointment to his cheek. Even Bernard, the swordsmanship trainer, didn't say a word about his cheek. He just sparred with the boy without even pointing out mistakes. When Bernard started just sparring with him, the coach used to always point out his mistakes. But now it's different. Bernard reports to Yuri's father that the boy is quite good when it comes to intelligence. But if the prince had been a little more sincere, he would have been a blessing to Betrayal. And Yuri remembered that it was when his coach started reporting everything to his father that they started sparring because they couldn't agree in training. When Bernard heard that Yuri was getting lazier and stopped putting in the effort, he stopped giving any advice to the boy. But from now on, things were going to be different. Yuri asked his coach Bernard to train him properly. He, Yuri Betrayal, from now on would train properly. The trainer didn't understand what had gotten into the boy, but agreed to train him properly. From now on, they will start the real training. Bernard got excited that the boy wanted to learn. The trainer began to attack Yuri, but the boy couldn't keep up with him. Before Bernard came to Betrayal, he was known as a sword demon. After finishing the training, the boy lay exhausted on the earth. Now he understood what is proper training with sword demon Bernard. If Yuri wasn't a mercenary in his past life, it would be much harder and worse for him to handle such training. Even though it was a bit tedious with such training, his abilities improved much faster. That's not a bad thing. Bernard, after the training, did not stay aside. He looked at the boy lying on the ground and did not understand how this wreath was able to repel all his attacks if so far the training had been too weak. By this time, Ina, the boy's maid, came running into the training ground. She had come to fetch Yuri. It was time for him to stop. His Majesty was requesting the boy's presence. The boy asked why his father was calling him and asking for his presence. but to which the girl replied that Count Johannes had brought his son. Johannes's son was the one who betrayed the kingdom and gave the empire a chance in Prince Yuri's past life. His name was Got Bahwar, and he was the leader who attacked Yuri from behind as the imperial soldiers one by one tried to kill him. Yuri heard that the count's son was here now, very close to him. He got furious and asked Ina where the bastard was now. The boy quickly changed his clothes and came to the refectory as his father had instructed. He sat there with a nonchalant face and ate his meat. The third prince had changed so much he had become much smarter, Count Johannes remarked. But Yuri's father only said that the boy seemed to have taken the wrong pills. Count Johannes objected, and said that if such pills existed, he would like to give them to his son. He still had work to do. The third prince of Betrayal sat angrily at the table and looked at young Got as if he were ready to attack him right now. Yuri's older brother asked if he and Got had had a fight, but the third prince replied that Got had stabbed him in the back. The older brother Joshua heard these words and only laughed. And what will our almighty Yuri Betrayal do? At this time, Yuri was still looking at Count Johannes's son and noticed that the boy looked ordinary. But in fact, now he thinks, as he matches the mood of others, he has not changed at all. The young prince decided that this time he would not do anything. He would just leave everything as it was, all for Got. The boy needs to control himself now. This life will not follow the same shameful path of the past. Come to think of it, around this time Yuri got into a fight with Got. Perhaps he decided to betray Yuri because he had a grudge against him since that day. Yuri and Got were walking in the backyard when the prince threw a wooden sword into Got's hands. He had heard that Got was quite good with a sword. Yuri told the little rival that the kingdom didn't need weak-minded knights, but Got wasn't an official knight after all. Yuri tried to evoke a sense of honor from Got. Wouldn't he be a knight who serves this kingdom? Got replied that yes, he is. Then Yuri offered him a duel, unexpectedly attacking Got. A surprise attack? How cowardly. The third prince is supposed to be honorable and he attacked sneakily. As Got lay on the ground, Yuri approached him with a stick in his hands and told him that in his past life, Got had used his father's honor to sell information to the empire. Got's father is a magnificent count and an honorable knight. Otherwise, he wouldn't have so many titles, Yuri said to the boy lying on the ground and not understanding anything. Yuri reached out to Got and said that he knew that Got just wanted to survive, but this time he would stand firm on Betrayal Earth. Yuri can't let her dissent any night, including herself. Reaching out, Yuri told Got to think about his words and try to understand the very essence of the situation. Joshua, who was watching the fight from the sidelines, came up behind him and said that it was inspiring. Yuri is really good at fighting. But did Joshua really think Yuri would lose this fight to Got? Who does his big brother think he is? Does he even know who Yuri is? Joshua replied that Yuri is the worst goofball and rogue that ever existed in the kingdom, but that Yuri said he wasn't like that anymore, and Joshua should stop causing trouble too. Joshua didn't understand. Since when did Yuri change so much? Did he hit his head so hard? After another evening workout, the guy was lying on the earth again, and next to him stood, and here was Coach Bernard. Good job. Yuri should be done with his training for the day. Bernard thinks Yuri is ready to learn about the mana control method. Yuri was inspired by these words. He realized Bernard was going to teach him his control. But Bernard said that his control is not so good considering the boy's potential. He needs to learn Betrayal's method. The Betrayal method is the best method of control. It is very clean and efficient. In his past life, Yuri had studied this method. He was able to master it in a masterful way. Then Yuri asked Bernard to recommend him some knights based on his potential, rather than his skills. The young principal remembered that there was one technique he hadn't even tried to learn in his past lives. These words made Bernard think very hard. If only based on potential, Gerald would be a good fit for Yuri. Bernard's thinking was strictly based on potential alone, but Yuri was surprised by the coach's choice. Before the regression, Yuri had only met Gerald near the end of the war, and he had pretty good skills. The third prince was surprised that Gerald was able to survive so long with them. His potential was really special. Gerald was always angry that he could have been much stronger if he had practiced more. Now Yuri understood why Gerald was angry at himself, because while he had such special potential, Gerald hadn't honed it when the war started, and they were both still stupid. On reflection, Yuri realized he needed Gerald and he should meet the bum. Yuri would enlighten him on everything. Yuri immediately went to Gerald's training room to see if he was doing well. Gerald's trainer said of course things were not as good as Yuri's, but he was working hard and working on it. The boy immediately asked where Gerald was. Looking down, he saw some very enthusiastic fighters training tirelessly. The trainer immediately showed the boy Gerald's rookie, and he immediately understood what Bernard was talking about. Training should be based on the desire to improve your skills. But Gerald was just doing as much as he needed to. At this rate, he would soon give up his position. Yuri asked Sir Rousseau to bring him a wooden sword. The young prince wanted to join in the sparring. The boy pointed his finger at that sneaky bastard Gerald, who didn't want to do any more than he had to. The sparring was to be with him. The two opponents were now facing each other, Yuri telling Gerald that he had heard how gifted he was. The young prince asks if Gerald would be willing to show him what kind of dough he is made of, to which Gerald immediately agrees. In the course of the sparring, Yuri realizes that Gerald does not want to make any unnatural movements. During the battle, Gerald realizes that the boy's movements are so unnaturally consistent, as if the young prince is deliberately adjusting to his pace. It's not much fun, it's like they're just playing around, so now should they get more serious? Gerald suddenly blocks the young prince's attack, and Yuri realizes that Gerald has animal reflexes. Yuri wanted to gradually build up the tempo, but nothing worked. Even with his past, Gerald is still a pretty good knight. Yuri thought he could beat him. Still, the young prince must hit Gerald at least once. He makes a quick dash and hits his opponent with his wooden sword. This attack really hits him, everyone praising the boy. His Highness was magnificent. In the moment, Gerald realizes he's in the role of attacker, but it feels like he's the one being cornered, with the taunts among the other knights. He was fed up with this attitude, and decided to use the mana control method to attack the third prince. He almost killed the young Prince Yuri, but luckily it was only a couple of cut locks of hair. Gerald pulled himself together in time and prevented an attack that could have been fatal. He was very scared for the young prince. Everyone in the room was very concerned about the young prince's condition, but also said it was fine. It was the first time they had seen the sparring. Yuri pulled the bandage over the cut on his forehead and asked Gerald to raise his sword to continue sparring. Now that's a really fun bout. No reason to stop now. During the next sparring session, Gerald realizes that the prince is very different from him, to the limit. No. The prince is pushing himself beyond his limits. Gerald's blood began to boil. He had never felt this way, not even when he was sparring with stronger opponents. Well, this young prince was making some kind of feeling inside him build up. Gerald used the mana control method against the prince again, but this time he knocks the sword off the prince's hands. That's the end of the fight. Yuri told Gerald that he understood something by extending his hand to him. It was a good sparring session. Gerald realized that Yuri showed a strong determination and perseverance that he had never seen before. How could such a young prince be so determined and persistent? Where had he picked up so much skill in sparring? Gerald squeezed the boy's hand very hard as he pondered all of this. It suddenly dawned on him that he had made the prince bleed, and now he decided to just stand there and do nothing. Yesterday he turned around and ran for his life. It was just a mistake. He didn't want to hurt the prince. After the sparring was over, the prince fell to the ground again, although everyone was shouting from the balcony that his highness had been magnificent. The sparring between Gerald and Yuri was watched by Captain Sand of the Knights of Betrayal. A few days later, Yuri was waiting for Gerald's shift to end so he could take him somewhere. Gerald was reluctant to go, chalking it up to the fact that he needed to work out. Yuri told Gerald that he seemed to have gotten his thoughts in order, and it was all thanks to him, so Gerald now owed Yuri. The young prince realized that now Gerald was really putting in the effort, although it was still not enough, but overall, it was more than enough for now. Gerald wondered where Yuri was taking him, but the young principal asked him to keep quiet and follow him. The young principal also called for the help of the royal magician Briol Hernando. Hernando also refused, saying that he would be glad to help, but he had urgent matters to attend to. Yuri knew where to press and how to make Hernando go with them. He said he would forgive the royal mage his card debt. If Hernando goes with them, the young prince will forgive absolutely everything that the magician lost to him. Yuri pressed pity and asked, "Has he ever lied?" To which Hernando replied that outside the gambling house, no. But Hernando wanted to say that he had never seen Yuri outside the gambling house. Yuri went pale. Was he really like that? No matter, Yuri was willing to forgive Hernando's debt, so the royal mage needed to stop talking and go after him. Well, for that matter, Hernando wanted Yuri to put it in writing, so that's what the third Prince of Briel's words are worth, Yuri thought. He turned around abruptly, pointed his finger in Gerald's direction, and said he was vouching for him. Yuri meant that Gerald should witness his words, Yuri Briel's words. Well, now that Gerald had vouched for Yuri's words, the magician was ready to go with them. But where exactly would these three go? Their team consisted of a knight, a magician, and the little prince. Yuri revealed his plan and told these two that they were going to Sword Mountain. From that point on, they are going to rob the progenitor dungeon. Royal Mage Hernando didn't even know that there was such a passage under the royal palace. Gerald was curious about what was at the end of this cave. He walked first in line. Yuri told him that this cave leads directly to the Mountain of the Sword, and at the end of it, the mountain itself awaits them. Sword Mountain is a place that only the legends of the founder have survived. In Yuri's past life, after Briol was taken over by the Empire, they found a dungeon hidden inside the Sword Mountain. A hidden relic was found on the Sword Mountain. It turned out to be the legacy of the founder of Briol. Yuri had read it out in the newspaper. Back then, the Imperials made a lot of noise, claiming that they had discovered this legacy of Briol's founder. However, this passage was a path of desperate retreat for Yuri. Because of this, Yuri couldn't take back the Briol legacy, and it fell into the hands of the Empire. But now, compared to the past when he was only running away. In this life, Yuri is relentlessly moving forward, not towards the past, but towards a bright future. That's right, Yuri would see it all for himself, what legacy the founders of Briol and his forebears had left behind. When they reached the end of the cave and made their way out to the beautiful Sword Mountain garden, they realized that they would also need a key to open the door to the artifact. Where was Yuri going to get the key to that door? Hernando wondered. Yuri replied that the key was in the corner, just like in his previous life. Back then, the guy didn't know what it was for and paid for it badly. As the boys made their way through the garden on the mountain, Hernando hurt himself on the prickly vegetation. Yuri asked to just follow him and try not to hurt himself again. Gerald and Hernando began to suspect something wrong with the boy. Maybe he had eaten something wrong. Yuri had gotten a lot farther and asked the two men if they were coming and what they were waiting for, to which the two helpers replied that they were already running. There was a pack of terrible wolves ahead of them. They move in groups. Most likely there are even more of them. Yuri told the others that he had read it in a book. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known all this. Mage Hernando started to back up, suggesting that they quickly pass by before the wolves noticed them. But then he stepped on a twig, and a crackling sound went through the forest. The wolves immediately attacked the three while Hernando was already apologizing for his clumsiness. Gerald didn't waste much time and saved Sir Hernando with a quick swing of his sword. Yuri assessed the situation and realized that Gerald knew that the dire wolf's fur was quite rough, and so he used mana control. Gerald did well, but there was another problem. Now the wolf leader had his eye on them, and now they wouldn't be able to get away so easily. With a howl, the wolf leader summoned the rest of the wolf pack to help in the battle against the three rogue wolves. The wolves surrounded the boys with their pack in a flash, Gerald standing in front and ready to fight back. He asked the other two to stay close to him so that he could protect them. Gerald fought quite well, as expected of a captain of the Briol Knights. He is truly gifted. But even so, Gerald still had a lot to learn to become stronger. It looks like it's also time for Hernando to show his abilities that His Majesty, Yuri's father, believes in. Yuri does find a good use for Briol's battle mage Hernando. Suddenly, Hernando's fire attack also followed to the aid of Gerald's sword strike following the wolf. Yuri really didn't know that there would be other monsters besides the dire wolves on the mountain. Because of that, the team had been greatly delayed there in the forest. But now, they were finally here at the top of Sword Mountain. Gerald hesitated. If they were really there was nothing here, let alone any legacy. Yuri was pretty sure that the legacy was right here. There had to be something that looked like a sword, and they needed to get it out of the ground. Gerald asked Sir Hernando to help dig up the hilt of the sword, but Hernando refused, saying that mages should not hurt their hands. When the sword was already dug up, Gerald noticed that this sword did not look like the one that had been buried long ago. It looked like a new one. Well, could this be the sword that is considered to be the founder's legacy? Yuri wasn't quite sure if it was the same sword, after all. The culprit was written on the blade of the sword, as if the sword was prepared just for him. Suddenly, the whole place shook. Everything started to collapse, and it looked like the guys were about to find out if it was the right sword or not. The shaking caused the guys to fall into some sort of cave, at the end of which a huge crystal was visible. Yuri fell on top of Gerald, and Gerald protected his body with mana control while falling. That's impressive. Hernando, using magic, calmly descended into the cave. It was much deeper than he thought. Yuri said in a menacing voice that Hernando didn't think about protecting the prince at all, and protected himself. Hernando thought it was really necessary, but he couldn't concentrate properly in such a situation. Suddenly, Hernando heard a sound from behind him, coming from the crystal at the end of the corridor. When he turned around to see what was going on and what the sound was, he saw a creature that was wrapped in a red flame of power. But when Hernando spoke of what was happening behind him, Yuri didn't believe him, saying that if the mage wanted to change the subject, it wouldn't work with him. But there really was a ghost in the back, and when Yuri turned around, he was dumbfounded. At the end of the corridor was indeed the ghost of some knight who was already heading in their direction. Yuri recognized this ghost as a death knight and asked Gerald to quickly pull himself together and get up at last. When Gerald stood up, he still couldn't recover and didn't realize where he was and what this creature was heading in their direction. He was still just getting up. He hadn't really come to his senses, but he immediately asked His Highness Yuri to step back. He wanted to deal with the Death Knight himself. Yuri assessed the situation and thought what name this knight had. It's just a knight who came back after death. If a knight dies and is reborn as a Death Knight, he becomes stronger than he was when he was alive. However, it's okay, he's not dangerous, said Yuri, and started to walk closer to the knight. Gerald was dumbfounded as the young prince realized that the knight was not dangerous. Yuri was told this by his instincts. It couldn't be that a knight guarding the dungeon of his forebears would fight Yuri, a man with the same bloodline. The moment Yuri came close to the knight, he drew his sword and everyone thought that the prince was in danger, but the ghost stabbed his sword into the ground. Hernando shouted that the prince's head had been cut in two, but Yuri turned around and told him to watch his tongue. Then Hernando corrected himself and said that the prince's hair was chopped in two, but the prince was fine. The ghost, after seeing that Yuri didn't move from his swing of the sword, pronounced that the prince had the same smug demeanor as Eric Briol. Eric Briol. This is the name of a person that every resident of Briol knows. A master swordsman who conquered the entire continent using only a sword. Also Eric Briol, the ancestor of Briol, the land of knights and its first king. Yuri asked the Death Knight if he was the first to come here, to which the knight answered in the affirmative. The ghost also said that if he wasn't a descendant of Briol, he wouldn't have been able to lift this sword. So this is the same unrivaled sword used by the ancestor. The ghost didn't understand what the expression on the boy's face was, why he was looking at this sword so strangely, as if looking down on it. Yuri replied that he just felt guilty for picking up someone else's sword. The ghost asked the Briol descendant in Yuri's face to tell the reason why he had come here. The boy told him that he was Yuri Briol, the third prince of Briol of this era, and a descendant of Eric Briol, and asked that Eric's legacy be passed on to him. The Death Knight turned away and went to get the legacy. Since the time has come, he thinks he must complete his mission. The ghost of the Death Knight was to give Yuri what he wanted. Gerald thought it couldn't be. They came to the dungeon of Briol's progenitor and talked to the Death Knight. This wasn't how he imagined life in the ranks among the royal knights. Suddenly, Yuri asked Gerald what he was doing and why he wasn't going with them. Gerald at this time began to see different visions from Yuri's past. He thought he was starting to see some crazy stuff, came to his senses and ran after his companions. When the three of them got close to the crystal, it began to emit a bright blue light, and the knight said that he hoped Yuri and the others were worth it. Suddenly, Yuri found himself in some kind of desert, and in front of him stood the white silhouette of some kind of person. Yuri assumed that the progenitor was standing in front of him, but it was not a human at all. This white silhouette immediately attacked Yuri. When Yuri repelled the attack, he realized that the silhouette in front of him was using a mana control method just like Gerald. This white clone was showing the prince how to use the mana control method. It was the basics. The silhouette wanted Yuri to repeat the attack he had just made. Yuri realized that his ancestor was truly insane, training someone in a method of mana control when they hadn't learned it yet, and during a battle. Only someone who was living his second life could do that. Yuri tried it and it started to work. It was clear that Yuri didn't fully understand everything, but he was willing to try what worked in battle. Young Prince Yuri needed to become as strong as possible as soon as possible. In the near future, the Empire would show its greed and take over Briol. He couldn't let that happen again. Yuri was willing to do anything to destroy the Empire and prevent their plan to take over Betrayal from coming to fruition. This time, the third prince of Betrayal could not make past mistakes, just when life had given him a second chance. Yuri had to make Eric Briole's sword skills his skills. Gerald, at this time, got into the training room. There were training dolls in front of him. The swordsman realized that there was someone else here and called out to him. Let him come out and not hide. His enemy was behind him. He stood there looking nonchalantly at Gerald and waited for him to turn around. When the swordsman Gerald turned around, he saw his reflection in his enemy's face. He realized that it was the Death Knight's trials. He wondered if his opponent who looked like him was also named Gerald or not. Gerald's doppelganger advised him not to fight his fate. He had not become a knight to live a comfortable life. He also advised Gerald to stay away from the third prince. Otherwise, he would become unhappy if he continued to fight fate. Gerald would have agreed with him if he was the past Gerald, but now he had changed. After that sparring with Yuri on the training ground, Gerald realized that he was really bored with such a show-off. But his doppelganger definitely wouldn't realize that, because he wasn't real. The doppelganger claimed that Gerald couldn't turn back time and prevent what he had done. Thinking about what Gerald had done only distracted him from the real thing, what was happening now. The answer didn't please Gerald's doppelganger, and he decided to attack the swordsman. But his attack was so predictable that Gerald easily repelled it. His doppelganger used the sword, focusing it on defense to avoid all sorts of risks. Gerald began to realize that he past really was a dull opponent in battle. When Gerald was able to attack his clone, he saw some sort of mud flowing out of him. He realized that of course a second phase must follow. The creature had grown to an astounding size. Gerald thought that the prince was probably in the heat of battle now too. He hoped that Yuri wouldn't lose the fight. At this time, the prince was already lying battered and exhausted by the cliff. His opponent had almost defeated him. The white clone used a powerful attack against the young prince, and it almost resulted in serious consequences for Yuri. But at the moment of impact, Yuri grabbed his sword and parried this powerful attack with his newly obtained sword. The prince was wondering how much time had passed since he got here. It was a bit dangerous. If this attack got to him, things could end badly for him. But the question of how he should use the mana control method and also swing his sword thanks to the relentless fighting was almost closed. After some time in battle, Yuri's mana finally began to gradually stabilize. As the young prince and descendant of Eric Betrayal was able to master the method, the creature that was his opponent gradually began to vaporize. After defeating their rivals in the other dimension, the boys all returned back to the cave. "Looks like they all had a good dream," said the Death Knight, who had been waiting all this time for the guys not to move away from the crystal. When Yuri asked what it was, the knight said that it was Eric's order, something he had left to the heir of Betrayal, who would one day come and ask for help. In Yuri's past life, the Sword Mountain had been destroyed by the Empire to the point where no one from Betrayal could reach it. Yuri asked the Death Knight if his progenitor also used the mana control method, to which he immediately received a negative answer. Eric had studied it during his journey to the Eastern lands in his later years. It is his final legacy, created from the culmination of all his knowledge, and Yuri is his first successor. The young prince wondered why it all passed to him and not the royal family. The knight replied that the dungeon is only opened at the right time. When this dungeon opens, it means that it is time to use this power. But what time the knight was talking about was not clear. He didn't know the answer to that question himself. This was something Yuri, the third prince of Betrayal, had to find out on his own. Yuri asked the knight what the name of this mana control method was, to which he received the answer that Eric called it Heart and Soul Strike. The knight asked Yuri Betrayal to get on his knee. He must give the heritage of the progenitor to the descendant of Betrayal. The knight instructed Yuri not to fear his enemies, to do what he believes in until the very end and fulfill his duty as a Betrayal. Yuri must keep in mind, Betrayal do not disregard honor even after death. That is the Betrayal oath. Guy woke up again in his bed in his residence. He was woken up by the very same maid, Ina. Ina was worried if Yuri was okay. He looked like he would fall asleep as soon as he put his head on the pillow. Did he not get enough sleep? Yuri said he was fine and referred to going to the royal library last night. Then the maid asked what had gotten into the boy, why he decided to go to the library so late. Then the boy replied that he was looking for old records. According to the royal genealogy records found in the library, Eric Betrayal had a brother, a man, disappeared from the annals of history and left no name behind because he refused to give up his honor. He must have been the Death Knight who met their troop in that very cave. Most likely, he was also the master who owned the sword that Yuri had gotten on his trip to Sword Mountain. Aina asked Yuri to get dressed as soon as possible, for His Majesty was expecting him. Aina didn't know why, but after meeting with Sir Hernando, His Majesty asked Yuri to come. Hernando warned that after coming to the kingdom, he would immediately report everything that happened here today. He felt it was mandatory. When Yuri came to his father, he told him what he had learned from Hernando's story. His Majesty was not pleased that the boy not only left the palace of his own free will, but also found the dungeon of the progenitor on the Sword Mountain. Yuri told his father that this was the case. Then his father asked the boy if this was the sword he had found in that dungeon. Recently, His Majesty had heard many things that Yuri had changed a lot. His maid Ina and Bernard and Sena and even Hernando had talked about it. His father wanted to know what had changed the boy so much, what had affected him so much. Yuri took a step back. His father thought the boy didn't want to tell him anything, but the reason for the withdrawal was different. When the father asked Yuri why he was backing away, he said it was because the father was clenching his fist. The father demanded that the boy start talking, so Yuri began his story. He told that he had a dream, and in that dream he had committed a terrible sin. The father formally asked the boy, Yuri Briol, what sin he had committed in the dream. The boy told how it was and said that the sin was that he failed to save Briol. In his dream, Briol was part of a big war in which many innocent people died. He tried to save Briol, but he failed. The kingdom fell and he dishonorably fled, eventually died. Yuri said that when he woke up from his sleep, he realized that the necklace his mother had given him was missing. The boy also suggested that maybe the dream was a warning from his mother. Then his father asked Yuri what had caused the kingdom to fall in the boy's dream. Yuri felt that it was too early to say that the kingdom had been destroyed by the Empire. Plus, there was a chance that the Empire wouldn't attack since Yuri was changing the past. He told his father he wasn't quite sure. There was a dark army there that he doesn't know. His father speculated that it could be a common nightmare or a warning from Lily, but he's glad his son picked himself up. For Yuri, it wasn't as wonderful as his father thought it would be. He hadn't picked himself up. He was only trying to wash away all the Wu sins. Then Fior Briol, Yuri's father, said they needed to clarify something. He asked the boy to bring his sword. Fior Briol is a genius who has held a sword since birth and a man of many titles. He had earned his name in this continent with his unimaginable skills. He was among the top 10 strongest of the continent, and was also considered the strongest among the top 10. Simply put, he was the strongest sword master on the continent that no one would dare to look down on. This was the first time Yuri had come to his father's training room. It was not bad and quiet. Fior didn't think any of his sons had a talent for swordsmanship. Talent? What is talent for a swordsman? Fiore asked his son, pointing his sword at him. Strength, speed, or reflexes, or outstanding intelligence? His father asked the boy. If one can master all of these, can one become the strongest knight or not at all? What is more important than the things on the surface is what can make the boy surpass his human capabilities. That something could be something above a crisis or a sense of duty. While Fiore was enlightening his son to all of this, the aura around him suddenly began to change. Fiore kept saying that he didn't know what it was called, but it was something like the call of the sword. The boy didn't take long to answer his father that it was fate, and perhaps it could be so. In his past life, Yuri had not followed the path of the sword. But what now? The father asked Yuri how he felt now, if he should hold the sword now, if he could hear the sword calling him. Fiore kept asking and plunging the boy deeper and deeper into this topic. When death is near, does he hold on to his sword? But after such words and questions, Yuri began to realize that he felt nothing. Then Fiore's aura became unbearable. It became unbearable to be in the training room. His aura pressured the boy more and more. Suddenly the entire training area was filled with shouts that the prince had to leave, run away, he couldn't stay here. Suddenly Yuri woke up. He was standing in the fire in the midst of burning Briol. He didn't understand why the kingdom was burning again. Suddenly he heard shouts from behind him that he had been found, and when he turned around, he saw Imperial soldiers. Then Yuri realized that he was back in the same unfortunate day when the Empire attacked the kingdom and Briol fell in flames. Everything was repeating as if Yuri was in Groundhog Day. Briol was on fire. Again he was being attacked from behind. But this time the same knight who saved him last time wasn't here. Yuri turned around and parried the enemy's attack. Yuri lowered his arms and thought that it was all just a dream. In the end, Betrayal was still destined to fall without strength. The prince couldn't stop it, but he made a vow that he would never fear his enemies. The Death Knight in the cave on the Sword Mountain told him to do what he believed in and fulfill his duty to Betrayal to the very end. This caused Yuri to raise his sword again and do his duty. He lashed out at the enemy with unprecedented fury. He once again killed the enemies one by one, but now he had mana control skills. The enemies were more and more. They shouted that Prince Betrayal's end had come, asking him to surrender. But Prince Betrayal never disregards honor. Even after his death, he stands to the very end and does his duty as a Betrayal. Yuri, when talking to Bernard, wanted the trainer to teach him the progenitor's swordsmanship. Bernard was very interested in it himself, but it would be extremely difficult to do. Yuri knew it made sense, considering the name the sword demon had. But Bernard said it was fine. Even if Yuri didn't fully master it, Bernard had already provided for that. Bernard was right, but that couldn't help him at all. This sword skill was related to the mana control method. When the trainer saw the sword and the boy's control method, he realized that he and the sword were one and the same. Normally, the mana control method is used to strengthen the sword's skill, but this looked different. That was why the boy said that it would be difficult. Besides, the method itself was only half learned. Bernard assured the boy that it was fine. Even if the boy only learned the method halfway, he would help Yuri, but in return he would stay in Betrayal. Even if Yuri didn't fully learn the method, there would be parts that Bernard would be able to understand. Yuri and Bernard make a pact. Bernard stays in Betrayal, and in return, he teaches Yuri the mana control method. Immediately afterward, Bernard raised his sword towards Yuri and asked him if he would like to demonstrate the method in practice. Yuri, of course, agreed to show what this mana control method he had learned on the Sword Mountain could do. A blow to Yuri Betrayal's heart and soul. By the way, Bernard forgot to tell the prince something. He was already going to stay in Betrayal and not go anywhere. That is, he just led the boy on. Bernard saw that the boy hesitated and decided to attack first, since the young prince does not attack. After another training session, Yuri lay in his chambers and pondered the fact that everything was changing. In this future, Betrayal would not be destroyed because of his mistake, even though no special measures had been taken to do so. The fact that Bernard chose to stay in Betrayal proves this. Changing the future seems so vague and uncertain, but little by little it is definitely changing. But that's not all. The young prince has yet to stop the Empire. And to stop the Empire, Yuri gathered unmistakably, without making a single mistake. But Yuri's reverie was interrupted by Ina, saying that right now, he should only avoid trouble without mistakes. Yuri asked Ina if there was anything else on the schedule, to which the girl replied that every day the prince brings trouble and therefore doesn't even know what Ina is talking about. Also, the girl reminded the young prince that he had an appointment for tomorrow. The next day, Yuri had a meeting of the elders waiting for him. His Majesty said that this time the prince was obliged to attend. Yuri would need to leave early tomorrow morning. It was said that most of the elders would be present at this meeting. There will definitely be stubborn and scary people there at this meeting, but Yuri must not start a fight under any circumstances. The girl held the prince's hand and asked him to do so, and Yuri promised that he wouldn't start anything this time. The next day at the elders' meeting, the boy sat back and realized that Ina was right. The objections started right from the start of the meeting. Duke Eugene Gennard Jethry immediately began by saying that His Highness shouldn't learn an unconfirmed method of mana control, and the rest of the council members also agreed with this. Usually the management of the kingdom is discussed here, but not this time. The seat at the head of the table had long ago become an expanse of fighting for the throne. Yuri now understood why his father had not attended such meetings in the past. Duke Eugene claimed that the prince would be better off spending his time learning the Betrayal method, rather than learning some obscure method. What is he talking about? An unconfirmed method? It's the method of Betrayal's progenitor and his legacy. Eugene barked again. How could everyone be sure that it was the progenitor's heritage, but it showed that he doubted the prince's words. Eugene tried to tell everyone that they should make sure of everything. Wasn't the meeting called because he was worried about the prince's future? Yuri said that in order to discuss his mana control method, they even held a meeting of the elders. He was quite honored by Duke Gennard's decision. What a shame. He was the one who first bowed his head to the Empire once Betrayal fell. Then and now, he always knew how to find the right words and lick someone's ass. The captain of the Knights of Betrayal, Seend, said that he wasn't in a state to make hasty judgments. But every method of mana control has its pros and cons, and every person has their own unique traits. Eugene interrupted the captain and said for everyone to just listen. The captain of the Betrayal Knights himself says that he is not sure about this method of mana control. Everyone else blew up, but after all, Sir Sign didn't say he wasn't sure about this method. He just meant to say that each method is valuable in its own way. But Eugene thought those words were the same. His supporters also blew up, proving the point that Duke was just chewing out that this mana control method could harm the prince. The situation changed drastically in the blink of an eye. If one studied the mana control method for a small amount of time, there was a possibility of completely changing the operation of the core. But from the experience of battling in the illusion of the progenitor, the blow to the heart and soul is already tightly rooted in Yuri's core. But the guy is sitting in this meeting and can't even explain it to the others and what he should do. Suddenly, Free Lord Calzio Aaron raised his hand and asked for one question. He asked Eugene if he had ever fought an orc in his life. He could choose words. But what about battles? Eugene immediately wanted to change the subject and asked the Free Lord to introduce himself and his title. The Lord immediately stood up and introduced himself, Calzio Aaron, Free Lord of Betrayal. Eugene did his best to point him to his seat. How could a mere baron attend the Council of Elders? Aaron said that he didn't want to come himself, but there was nothing to be done, for the Duke of Sinda had entrusted it to him. Hearing the Duke's name, Yuri realized that he was not just a lord, he was definitely a margrave guarding the borders of Betrayal. As befits his title, he is a lord guarding the borders as well as the entire front line. He is known as a true soldier who has spent his entire life on the battlefield, and also because he has absolutely no interest in the affairs of the nobles, so that prompted him to send a representative to the meeting of the elders. One of the dukes present at the meeting asked why Duke Sindor had sent Lord Aaron here for the elders' meeting. The lord replied that the duke was not much of a talker. However, he saw that the high-ranking nobles were playing their political games here. They also indulged in meaningless arguments. Aaron realized why the Margrave had sent him here. In a real battle, the type of mana control method didn't decide much, whether it was Briole's method or the Imperial Lionheart art. In the end, it all depends on the person using it and how they use it. Aaron asked the prince what he thought about it. Yuri replied that as the Prince of Betrayal, he didn't quite understand what was going on here. Why there is such a fierce discussion about whether or not he will master the progenitor's mana control method. No matter what the members of this council say, Yuri will learn the progenitor's method anyway. And so the sword-wielding prince decided to follow the will of the progenitor and the mana control method. So why do people who don't own the case, who don't have any either authority or responsibility, keep interfering in the prince's case? Well, usually, so much noise is made by people who sit behind a desk and have never held a sword in their life. The Free Lord, speaking rather rashly in Eugene's opinion, was pissed off, but there was nothing he could do. Lord Aaron apologized and asked to forgive his rudeness, but he can't help it. He's just an ordinary warrior who fights orcs on the border every day. Earlier, he had already mentioned it, but he decided to ask again. At least someone will eventually tell him which of the people here have fought orcs. Those present here. What did they think orcs would care what method of mana control their opponent used? One of the dukes agreed with Aaron. He's right, and yet, His Highness is a Yun, so his judgment might be rash too. Are they saying that Yuri should by all means change his method of controlling mana because he made the wrong decision? Everyone here saying such a thing is well aware that it's no longer possible. In any case, Aaron doesn't think that His Majesty is going to change anything or everyone here is going to forcibly extract his core. Aaron doesn't think they'll do that, so why all the arguments? Besides, he assumes His Majesty agrees with it too, doesn't he? And the rest of us are just sitting around ruining His Majesty's psyche. Eugene is even more furious. Aaron says that Betrayal is a quiet place, although the Margrave himself has been quieter than the grass lately after receiving the budget. These words infuriated Aaron. Do hundreds of people have to die before the council realizes that these are not quiet times? The council must not have seen or heard the reports of soldiers dying daily. On the day the Lord left the Margrave kingdom, 4 people died. Moreover, Iran had personally buried his friend, with whom they had a tight-knit relationship and breakfasted together every day. Orcs never rest, Mr. Nobleman. They spend their entire lives fighting and killing. Come to think of it, around this time, there was a problem between Betrayal and the Principality of Klein. During this time period, orcs began to cross the border repeatedly and cause a lot of damage. I wonder if the behavior of the orcs had changed in any way. The orcs must have become much more sinister than they were before. Yuri asked Aaron how Klein was doing, which surprised the Lord, and he asked again. Yuri clarified isn't the army of the Principality of Klein involved, to which Aaron said that their border guards had suddenly retreated. Young Prince Yuri asked what about the border village, to which the Lord replied that it had been completely enslaved. Some of the people had died and some had become slaves. The situation was stalemate. Yuri realized that everything was happening exactly as in the past. Yuri began to ponder if this was a civil war or if the Duke's third child was involved. When Yuri realized that he was thinking out loud, he looked around and realized that everyone was looking at him in surprise. He got up from the table, apologized, and said that he thought that was enough for today. As he left, Yuri told the others to discuss more important issues than his method of controlling mana. For example, they could discuss defense against the Principality of Klein and the orcs. Enough with meddling in the affairs of a child going through puberty. Toward evening, Lord Aaron communicated through the crystal ball with his duke and told him everything the young prince had said. He also said that rumors were spreading that the young prince had changed a lot. The duke instructed the lord to look into the matter and observe the boy, study his biography, and they would be in touch again soon. Aaron, he went to the window and looked outside and thought how peaceful it was, even with the many soldiers dying on the border every day. Outside the window, he saw the third prince who had sneaked out into the street wearing a hood so he wouldn't be recognized. Next to him was the mage Hernando. He had sneaked out of the palace as Yuri had asked. His heart was so stirred. Before, when he was a child, he used to run away from home as often as he breathed. He was quite a troubled child. Hernando saw that there was a young lady in the back staring at them. Maybe she realized who they were. Yuri reassured Hernando that he was so disheveled, he could leave the palace whenever he wanted after all. Hernando said that for him, it's nothing more than a walk. But when he's with the young prince, the thought of running riot never leaves him. When Max asked where they were going, Yuri said that even if he was going to do something naughty, he wouldn't take him with him. They were going to a casino, the most illegal casino in the capital, but Yuri said they wouldn't do anything bad. Yuri said they wouldn't, so he just asked Magician to take him there. He knows the way. Yuri also assured Hernando that everything they were doing was for Betrayal. Hernando believed him and jumped into the casino. They have to turn the casino upside down. There were a few people in Yuri's past life at Betrayal that a lot of people talked about. A boss who was a big loan shark and ran the whole underworld. The best on the continent. A giant in the world of commerce. And another one who so beheaded the underworld boss. She held all of Betrayal in fear and was more than just a common assassin. One of those who died at her hands was him. The current big moneylender, Goryo. Goryo couldn't believe that such noble men would choose to do business with them. What an honor. It seems that Goryo and his men already knew who had come to this casino. They knew it was the third prince and the king's magician himself. Although Goryo's power is limited, someone has to take responsibility for what he does, right? A reasonable solution, said Yuri. But he didn't come here to play games and have fun. Then the moneylender suggested that Yuri sit down and talk if he didn't want to play games. Goryo heard that the prince and the mage didn't come to play games. In that case, maybe they came to borrow some money. That's right, the prince replied. He wants to borrow money and invest it to start a personal charity fund. Since they are borrowing money from a moneylender, they are at the bank, so the prince has big ambitions. The prince said, "Enough. It is not for the moneylender to question Yuri. They must get to the point quickly." In that case, the moneylender apologized and asked him to tell why the prince needed the money. Yuri told him that he planned to use the money to buy magranja, a spice from the Klein region, as it would soon be in high demand. Magranja is used to make high-quality spices, but the moneylender is not sure it is worth it. Yuri says that it will soon be as he said, and Goryo may not believe his words. Hernando has heard that war has broken out in the Principality of Klein, and that there are orcs roaming everywhere, but he doesn't think the price of spice will rise much because of that. He realized that Yuri just wants to buy the specialty of Klein Principality in advance. The moneylender also realized that Yuri is different from the rumors about him. Besides, he seems to be acting on more than just the information he just revealed. After talking so much, Yuri asked to decide the amount as an investor, not as a prince. How much money can the moneylender lend? Goryo and the prince made a pact. The moneylenders did lend the prince money, plus quite a bit. Hernando assured the prince it was too much. He could at least tell him in advance. But if Yuri had told Hernando who would have taken the boy to his father, wouldn't he? Now they're going to the trading floor. Yuri wants them to do something. In fact, Magrangia is guaranteed to make a profit. The only alchemist who knows the recipe, Duke Klein's attending physician, will die in the upcoming war. This product that would have no fixed price, at least until a replacement was found. He couldn't trust anyone else with it, so he came to the trading floor by himself to purchase the herb. Hernando hadn't expected this rundown place to be the one where they would buy the weed. Knocking on the door of the trading company, Yuri called out to a woman named Ilian Wood. The door was opened by a beautiful statuesque woman. Yuri immediately introduced herself to her as the third principal of Betrayal. The girl didn't understand what the third prince was looking for, but Yuri got straight to the point and said he wanted Ilian to do something for him. Ilian is a merchant in a declining firm, but soon enough things will be different. Ilian will become this greatest merchant, and unlike Goryo, full of honor and praise, resorts to every dirty trick possible. Ilian keeps her promises to her customers as if protecting their lives. Plus, she was a legendary trading center in Yuri's past life. The prince makes her a mythical merchant who will surpass all legends. Hernando was already tired and thought they were done for the day, but the principal replied that they had something else to do. The big merchants of the underworld, all of them are ready to help the prince. The only thing left is to find the assassin who ruthlessly killed Goryo. The survivor of the Assassin Academy, Asana. Yuri must find and help her. When the prince found Asana, she was dirty and in a place where homeless people live. Asana asked why he was here, to which Yuri replied that she could take it easy. He just decided to stop during his patrol to make a small donation to the needy. Yuri took a large bag of coins from Hernando to help Asana with her getting on the path. In his past life, Asana had borrowed an obscene amount of money from Goryo to cure a child. Like the others who borrowed from Goryo, Asana fell into debt, and that's when the legendary assassin was born. Yuri wants to change that. Yuri gave the bag of coins to Asana and advised her to use the money to cure the child at the temple. When asked by the girl what Yuri wanted in return, he replied that he was the third prince of Betrayal. Asana just needed to memorize the name. Hernando didn't understand why Yuri decided to give this money to a homeless woman, to which Yuri replied that it was an investment. Now, everyone Yuri needs for further plans is tied to his fate, but he needs one more person. Yuri had a question for Hernando, what he saw in the progenitor's dungeon, to which the mage replied that it was gambling. Hernando said that he had played the game of life in the Empire, in the casino of Basregas. On the whole, it suited him. The next day, Yuri's father summoned Hernando to his house and asked what had happened last night on patrol. Hernando said that Yuri had persuaded him to leave the palace with him, and they had gone to the casino. Fiore was puzzled. At the casino, did they play there with Yuri? To which the king's mage answered in the affirmative. Hernando told Fiore that he thought that the prince was good at card games, but as it turned out, it was not true. In the end, Yuri lost all the money. Then the prince walked around for a while and watched how ordinary citizens lived. He was interested in their way of life. Then they returned to the palace and stayed here until morning, said Kingdom Magician, deceiving the king himself. That same morning, Yuri was already practicing with Bernard on the training ground. The young prince noticed that the maids all had their eyes on his trainer Bernard. He told the coach about it and said that he should have gone to the ball. Perhaps there were people who would like Bernard there. But Bernard demurred and said he wasn't interested at all, and immediately tried to change the subject. What the guy said about swordsmanship, it seems that Yuri was right. The sword that the prince found on the mountain has no definite shape. Yuri also noticed that the movements of that sword were like a flow. Mana control method, which is also a form of sword skill, something even Bernard himself can't learn. Coach needs to see Yuri in real combat to learn this method more, because it was not so easy. Speaking of which, Yuri's skills have improved quite a bit. He has an outstanding talent for handling mana. Bernard was surprised to see how well Yuri was handling it. Now Yuri felt guilty. He was trying to erase the traces of Betrayal's method learned in his previous life. He did it to experiment, and in the end it only made him feel worse. Bernard asked Yuri to slow down a bit. He felt like Yuri was in too much of a hurry. The young prince had already accomplished a lot for such a young age, but his body had not yet gotten stronger, and it was causing Bernard to worry. Yuri assured the trainer that he could handle it, and there was no cause for concern. The prince suggested to start the next round, only this time they will use real swords. He needs to get stronger. Also, Yuri offered a bet. Bernard would go to the ball if Yuri could hit him at least once. Bernard immediately refused, and the reason was that Bernard would win anyway, and Yuri never keeps his promises. He is known as the last person to argue with. Yuri started his attack. He had to prove Bernard wrong. That day, Yuri never managed to hit Bernard once. And a few days later, it was the day of the ball. At the ball came a carriage with the second prince of the empire, George Ivarna Granzian, with him. In the carriage was a girl. She could not take her eyes off the local beauty. This girl was Katerina, and she was a bit excited as she had not been here for a long time. Besides, Katerina wanted and hoped to meet someone here. At the same time, in her chambers, Ina was preparing Yuri for the upcoming ball and helping him to choose an outfit. He didn't like the way he looked. It was too chaotic because of the many accessories, so he asked Ina to take it all off. After Ina took off all of Yuri's accessories, Yuri asked Ina to dance with him, which confused the girl. Yuri explained that he wanted to practice, but he didn't have a partner, so could Ina help him with that. The girl reluctantly gave her hand to Yuri. She thought the prince wanted to play a joke on her, step on her foot or trip her up. But Yuri wasn't going to play a joke on her, much less make fun of her. He just wanted to dance with her. He held Ina close to him and asked her to follow him slowly. Ina asked Yuri if he was interested in her. She was not a bad dancer, but the girl said it was the first time she had such a small partner. The height difference shouldn't be a problem, by the way. Ina stepped on the prince's foot time after time. She stumbled and made mistakes, but it was cute. When the moment of the ball came, Yuri came in all guns blazing. He was in a good mood after dancing with Ina. He noticed that Duke Sindor himself had come to the ball. As expected, he was very different from the usual night. At the last meeting, only Baron Aaron, who was only a representative of Duke Sindor, had come instead. Yuri, in conversation with his brother, asked him if he had any problems with his eyes lately. He often wore glasses. His brother reassured the young prince, saying that it was not so bad that Yuri should worry about it. Suddenly the doors to the hall where the ball was held opened, and the second prince of the empire, George, entered. He was immediately greeted by King Fior, thanking Georg for coming to this humble place. Georg was grateful for Briol's hospitality and introduced his sister Katerina. Yuri saw Katerina and froze and was mesmerized by her beauty again. He still hadn't forgotten her and what bound them together. But he cannot get engaged to Katerina. He must not make the same mistakes he made in the past. All evening, Yuri watched everyone from the sidelines. He noticed that, as expected of his brother Cedric, he treats people with respect. This is the makings of a good king, and in comparison, Yuri was far from that in his previous life. Suddenly, Katerina came up behind Yuri and said hello to him, but she was distracted by another member of the Briol family. Damn, Yuri realized that he still had feelings, though he knows that it would end up being miserable. Just then, Ina appeared in front of the prince. She offered the prince some cookies. The prince thanked Ina and remarked how hard she was working. It must be hard. The girl said it doesn't cost her anything compared to cleaning up the mess someone leaves behind every day. Yuri said no matter, knowing who Ina meant by mess, and said the girl should just give him cookies. The girl left and told the prince that if he needed anything else he should just ask. Yuri wished the girl good luck. Suddenly, the second prince of the empire, Georg Ivarn Granzian, approached Yuri. He was an order of magnitude taller than Yuri. In the past, Prince Georg had been a commander in many battlefields. At the same time, he is the one who personally led Briol into decline. Yuri introduced himself in front of him, and could barely keep himself in check. He was not allowed to show hostility. Georg exuded a terrifying aura. He reeked of power and strength. The young prince realized it was a test. Suddenly, Georg just turned around and walked away with words that it was expected of Fior's son. This was quite threatening for a normal test. Yuri thought that Georg was young, but at this age he was already so strong. Frightening bastard, thought Yuri, brother and sister. Both of them are of the same species. Suddenly, Ina dropped the tray of wine glasses and left a stain on the fabric of Prince George's cloak. Georg drew his sword and wanted to punish Ina for staining the symbol of the imperial court. "If you follow the laws of the empire, you should be beheaded for such a thing," Georg said. Yuri was immediately furious at this. This scumbag had set this up on purpose and picked a fight with Ina. But Georg was stopped by King Fior, saying that Georg had come here to disturb his royal ball. If Georg wants blood, let him do it on his own land. No blood should be spilled in the castle of Briol. Georg began to justify himself to Fior. He asked for understanding from the king. Briol and the empire have always respected each other. Fior confirmed his words and hoped that Georg had no such intentions to spill blood at the ball. But Georg immediately reminded Fior of what had happened in Gottensha years ago. Back then, Fior had executed a knight of the empire not on the land of Briol. and His Majesty had respected Fior's honor and not held him accountable for what he had done. Georg's point was that what happened here at the ball was an identical situation, and it must be done to preserve the honor and dignity of both peoples. In the past, Yuri's father had once executed a knight of the Empire of his own free will. Georg said he wanted to do it not because he wanted to, but because he had to, and asked to end it quickly by putting a sword to Ina's neck. Yuri realized that stopping the prince now was tantamount to defying the Empire, but duties bordered on conditions, ideals on reality, justification on power. But after all, Betrayal does not disregard honor, even after death. Such is the Betrayal oath. Yuri stopped Georg's actions. He said Ina is his subordinate, so her mistakes, and her mistakes too. And while that may be enough, Yuri is still a prince, and if Georg took that into consideration, he asked to forgive Ina's blunder and fight him in return. Yuri hesitated for a long time at the beginning. In the moment he forgot that he was a sinner in the past, and this life was given to him as a punishment, and there was no way he could understand it. George said that since the third prince had made a good offer, he was going to accept it. Normally he would take part in the duel himself, but for the sake of the dignity of the imperial family, he would appoint a challenger. George will send the youngest knight suitable for Yuri's age, and Yuri will already have a duel with him, so they will see each other for a duel. Yuri immediately ran over to Ina and lifted her off his lap. He sent the girl to rest. That's what true knights do. Yuri headed to his chambers, but on the way, he met Katerina again, and turned away in the other direction. Now just another unnecessary thought. Next to Yuri's chambers, his older brother was already waiting for him. He asked the boy what he was thinking about in general. Yuri explained that he couldn't just stand by and watch Georg kill Ina. His brother said that Yuri wasn't really fixable and put a ruck on his head, praising his little brother for his courage. The brother wanted to help Yuri with the problem, but Yuri refused. It was his choice, and he should deal with the problem. The older brother said his words of encouragement, and that he believed in Yuri and would cheer for him in the duel. If only Betrayal hadn't been attacked by the Empire in the past, Big Brother would be running Betrayal now, Yuri thought, and headed to his chambers. The day of the duel had arrived, and both duelists were already standing and warming up in the dueling square. The king's mage, sitting next to the king and Senda, spoke of how he never thought the prince would be involved in such a duel. The prince's opponent was quite calm, wondering who would win in the end, because the opponent was a knight wielding a sword with such high skill. However, nothing else and could not be expected from the knight of the Empire, wondering if the prince will be able to cope with him. But King Hernando's mage, looking at the prince, was smiling. Just look at Yuri. There was no need to chew on him. A great mage among all the ranks given to mages by the Mystic Tower, this is a rank that no one has ever been able to achieve, a title bestowed only to those who have mastered the exclusive mystic path. Among all, the exclusive mystical path, which allows you to get a full view of the fate of the world of the study of fate, could only master Hernando. In this way, Hernando received permission from the world itself to examine the fate of the person on whom he was using his spell. Hernando remembered how they were playing cards with Yuri. He had just bragged and talked about the big cards. And as soon as he couldn't win even one game, he really can't play at all. Yuri teased him. This was the first time Hernando had lost money in a serious game since mastering the exclusive mystical path, and it couldn't be just a coincidence. Hernando can read his opponent's cards, and even their luck, with one quick glance, but he saw nothing in this kid. That figure he could make out through the illusion of a sword mountain, black hair and eyes, the symbol of the Betrayal royal family. That arrogant look definitely belonged to the third prince, and he was swinging his sword, unwilling to give up, even as his entire body bled, and eventually, the illusion ended with him collapsing to the ground, transfixed with despair. It was in this timeline, and a situation that Hernando considered a mere misunderstanding became extremely suspicious to him. However, when the prince had behaved strangely during their patrol, Hernando had used a fate study on him. It was a miracle that now he didn't know when he would be able to use again. He used the spell, and everything was confirmed. The fact that Prince Yuri had no destiny explained his strange behavior lately. You just look at Yuri's confidence in this fight and his ability to assess his strength and his opponent. He is definitely not worth chewing over. Yuri had been ready to fight for a long time now. How long would it be before his opponent would just wave his sword around like that? The duel began, and both opponents stood against each other ready to strike. Yuri rushed forward, putting all the despair and rage into the blow. The blade cut the air towards the enemy. The swords cut through the air at a deafening speed. Yuri and the knight merged in a deadly dance of steel and sparks. The clash of swords erupted like an explosion, and the prince was thrown backward. Each blow threatened to be the last. Fiore asked Hernando what his prediction for the fight was, knowing that he may have seen Yuri's fate. The fight between Yuri and the Imperial Knight continued, lightning-fast blows slicing through the air, swords intertwined in a furious dance of light and steel. Yuri merged with the whirlwind of blows, fending off the knight's onslaught with the grace of a predator, the determination of retribution in every movement. Hernando told Fiore that he wasn't sure. Then the king asked him if it was still time for him to leave the kingdom. He had come here to serve by chance. Hernando said he wasn't going yet. Fiore said that was very good and glad to hear such words. Could it mean that Yuri would be victorious? Hernando asked Fiore who seems to be the strongest knight in his eyes on the battlefield. Fiore, looking at the Empire Knight and how he is fiercely trying to win, said that opponent is stronger. He really looked like a very strong opponent. Then Hernando said that the first time he came to Betrayal was really by chance. So, as the strongest person on the continent capable of influencing the fate of the world was here. However, the sword cannot be retrieved. So Hernando thought there was no reason to stay here any longer. However, it didn't seem to be the time to leave. He thought so after the third prince of Betrayal, Yuri, changed his views and began to change his fate. While Fiore and Hernando were chatting in the stands, Yuri was still probing his enemy, but it looked like enough was enough and he needed to mount an attack. His lunge was very fast, so fast that the Imperial Knight didn't even realize what had happened when Yuri's sword was at his neck. Yuri's victory over the Imperial Knight was more than obvious. I guess there was nothing more to talk about. Fate had brought Hernando here and he had met someone who defies his destiny. From life to death and from death to life, the third prince's sword has changed this man's fate and the fate of the maid. Any move he makes is always defying fate. Yes, the one who lives against the fate of the world. Yuri Betrayal is beyond the control of fate. That fight was magnificent. Hernando would like to see with his own eyes how Yuri Betrayal would change the fate of this world. 5 years later, Yuri was walking down the hallway and rescued a maid who was being teased by his older brother. The maid saw Yuri at the end of the corridor and immediately realized it was him. Confident face, always carrying a sword. Why the older brother always mocked the maids was interesting to Yuri, and the maid gave the third prince a cookie as a token of gratitude. The girl gave the guy a really tasty cookie. It reminded Yuri of the same incident with Ina. As Yuri walked further down the corridor, he thought about the flawless hand limit. Using mana while holding the sword would reduce the strain on the hands. Yuri had come this far, and it had been 5 years since his death at the hands of Roland and his regression. By his calculations, just about that time the days of peace would end. Most likely right now at the council, everyone was just busy discussing it. Yuri arrived at the hall where the dukes were meeting, but when he knocked, no one answered him. He thought that everyone was too busy arguing to hear the knock and decided to bang on the door harder, but only knocked it down. Yuri asked his father for permission to sit down at the table. He wanted to join the discussion too. He received permission from his father to be at the negotiating table and sat down next to him. One of the dukes continued his story. He said that they didn't have enough men to help the Allied forces. What he meant to say was that Betrayal should just ignore the Empire's request for reinforcements, in which case the other house could send more men. Yuri realized that everyone was arguing trying to benefit themselves. Betrayal's downfall had happened right in that time frame. A request to reinforce the Empire's allied forces. The Empire requested men from different countries and sent them to the east to kill the orcs. But their plan failed, and the enraged orcs began to cross the borders of nearby countries, all but the Empire. Then Betrayal realized that this was the Empire's plan, and because of this, Betrayal lost many great knights, including Leon. Now, Betrayal's third prince, Yuri, can't let this happen again. The great knights can't just be meat for the orcs. Yuri then silenced everyone and said that he himself will go as reinforcements to fight against the orcs. They must do something that would not tarnish Betrayal's honor and good name. Let everyone else do what nobles do. The next day, while Yuri was training with Bernard, his brother Cedric visited his training. He asked Yuri if it was true that the prince was going to join the allied forces. Members of the royal family don't have to do that. But Yuri always said it was the royal family's duties. Cedric only asked Yuri to come back alive, and he will protect the palace in Yuri's absence for now. Yuri asked Bernard if he would chew the prince out, but the coach believed that Yuri would return in one piece if he stayed out of harm's way. Bernard also told the prince to be careful. Orcs are hard to deal with. They are much stronger and bloodthirsty than Yuri thinks. Especially strong are those orcs who have a flag behind their backs. They are called orcavols. They are especially fierce and bloodthirsty. Their conversation was interrupted by Ina. She came with the news that Yuri's guest with the items he requested had arrived at the palace and was waiting for him. Yuri was waiting for Ilian Guillermo. He was Ilian's right-hand man. Guillermo came instead of Ilian because Ilian is currently on a trip. She still travels by herself. She likes it better that way. Those items that Yuri requested arrived, and Guillermo brought them for the prince as soon as possible. Those items that Yuri ordered from the trading company were the swords of the four paths. Are they really that precious? To Guillermo, they look more like decorative daggers. Yuri said that they were very valuable as they were an artifact containing ancient magic. These swords could be moved simply by applying your mana to them. Yuri asked him to tell Ilian his thanks, and also asked him to report to him how they were doing in the branch of the Empire the next time they met. When Guillermo left, Asana came from behind. Yuri already knew she was here but couldn't compromise her while Guillermo was here. Yuri asked Asana what's up with Goryo. The girl said that just like Yuri asked, she gave him a warning. Great job. He's still trying to get his hands on Ilian's money whenever he gets the chance. Asana asked if it was true that Yuri had joined the Allied forces. She had heard the courtiers talking about it. Yuri said he was, and Asana asked him to be careful, as if Yuri wasn't going to take her with him. But the prince had calculated everything, and Asana must go with him. Asana said that whatever she had to do, it was better this way than her past life, and disappeared. A few days later, the day of departure came. Yuri was already in all his weapons. He considered himself invincible, and was determined to elevate Briol's reputation to the heavens. Just then, the departure ceremony began, and the third prince of Briol approached his father, King Fior, for parting words. Fior asked Yuri to look behind him. All the soldiers he sees are precious lives that rest on Yuri's shoulders. Not all will be able to return. However, Yuri will manage to make sure they are not doomed to a miserable death like in the past. Fior asked his son if he was sure, and Yuri said he was sure, as he had never been more sure of what he was doing. Suddenly, Yuri felt a murderous aura. His body froze. He couldn't move a muscle. The prince instinctively felt that right now death was coming at him, and if he tried to avoid it, he would still die. But in an instant, Yuri was able to overcome his fear of death and drew his sword to resist the attack of this terrifying aura. He was attacked at this moment by none other than his own father. But Yuri repelled the attack, so he was ready for further battles. Fiore was calm for him. This attack was done in lieu of parting words. No more would the king ask his son to return alive. Yuri turned to his army and shouted, "He is the third prince of Briol. He will lead everyone to victory. The soldiers must believe him." The army stopped for a rest when they were no longer far at the entrance to Sindor. If they traveled a little further, they would be in the border town of Sindor. After that, they would pass through Gid and head to the assembly point in Balshad. Here, Yuri was called out by Roland Flandre, the bastard who killed Yuri in his past life. He was honored to meet Yuri, even before their meeting. Roland wanted to tell Yuri that the prince was his biggest idol. After an incident that Roland learned about from his father that happened 5 years ago, Roland began to admire Yuri. When Yuri raised his sword to protect the maid, he became a living example of a true knight incarnate. So Yuri's worst enemy and murderer in his past life became his friend and comrade, and they got along. It was time for them to move out, and the Knight of Sindor warned Yuri that Duke Sindor was not known to be the most hospitable man. But when Yuri and his army arrived in Sindor, they were greeted with a most cordial welcome, as if they were expected, as no one had ever been expected. Heim. Theodore said they were simply showing respect for someone so young to be fighting on the front lines. He asked Yuri if he had ever fought orcs, to which Yuri replied that he had never, but he had read about orcs. Most of the soldiers here have never fought orcs, so Heim Theodore should at least train them all. Theodore then asked Yuri if he would mind if he gave something to the prince. Yuri didn't mind. They moved deeper into the basements of Sindor. Everyone was worried. But Theodore said they shouldn't be surprised. They would see everything soon. Theodore's gift to Yuri and his men was a captured orc that was waiting to be found. Theodore needed to study them from minor habits to the instincts inherent in orcs. Absolutely everything they could use in battle, considering the battle with orcs ahead of them. A more valuable gift could not be thought of. Yuri turned to the knight and asked what his name was and what was on his mind right now when he saw the orc. The knight thought it wasn't worth going that far. In his opinion, it was too much for a prisoner of war. Yuri asked Sir Haim to open the door to the orc's cell. Right now, the knight might think so, but what would he say after the real battle? Yuri ordered the knight to fight the orc alone and see what he was capable of. Until the knight felt it on his own skin, he wouldn't know what he was dealing with. The enraged orc roared, fangs bared, full of rage. The very death that spewed from the abyss rushed into the fray. The orc collapsed to the stone slabs with a roar as if from powerlessness, but there was a cunning game in that fall. As soon as the knight turned around to throw a taunt, the orc grabbed him from behind with lightning speed, demonstrating that he was not defeated at all. The orc unleashed a crushing blow to the knight's back, turning his enemy's swagger into a clang of shattering armor. The orc grabbed the older knight from behind, squeezing him in a chokehold as if trying to squeeze all the pride and life out of him. Everyone was preparing to fight to save the knight, but Sir Haim asked everyone to calm down. The orc had most of his tendons severed. He just wanted to show how orcs really are. If you open up for even a split second, he would immediately try to kill. The orc took the Betrayal knight hostage, and Sir Haim summoned an interpreter from the orc language, Kori. The orc said that if they did not drop their weapons now, he would begin breaking this knight's bones one by one. Yuri asked Hernando to deal with this orc. Then the king's mage took advantage of the moment and stunned the enemy. When the orc was stunned and immobilized, Yuri was able to pull the Betrayal knight out of the orc's hands with a single tug. A wave of rage shook the orc's body, and with a roar like a thunderclap, it broke free from its own shackles, preparing for the carnage. Yuri asked Sir Haim, "This is no ordinary orc after all. He is quite small, but he is experienced. During his capture, he ate a knight whole. This orc has killed many people." Another knight heard these words, wanted to deal with this orc himself. Yuri did not stop him. But first he advised him to look behind the orc's back. They are all waiting for them to war open. This orc is no exception. The ones the Betrayal warriors will face are even more insidious and evil, so they need to focus. This is a training exercise, not a massacre. They all need to focus and learn as many methods of killing orcs as possible. After they team-killed the orc with all their might, none of them felt satisfied. As expected, it was a simple training session after all, and the enemy couldn't even answer them. However, this training would help them increase their chances of survival in a battle with the orcs. They should thank Sir Haim. Everyone must be thinking that it doesn't fit the code of chivalry, but these vicious creatures don't deserve to be noble. The orcs here are nothing more than a copy of the real orcs. There are far more horrific things done in orc camps. What Sir Haim wants to show everyone now is the aftermath of those more horrific things. He showed the Knights of Betrayal the half-orcs. Orcs enslave humans and use them as toys, and they are the result of their playtime. Yuri asked Haim if he hated orcs, and the answer was that he hated them with all his soul, and would until the day he died. Yuri saw that Haim was so calm, as if he was fully aware of all the chaos. Everyone has a nemesis, and Yuri's was the Empire. Yuri heard that Sir Haim found the body of his dead son in an orc village. It seems that Karina is still stored in his memory. When Yuri was leaving Saindor, Sir Haim suggested he take an interpreter from the orc language of Kori with him. Yuri found being able to speak and understand the orc language to be a very useful skill, and took Kori with him. From here, Yuri and his army will head to the border. There will be a few hordes of monsters there, but Yuri shouldn't chew on that. Yuri said that the monster hordes are just as much of a danger to the border as the orcs, and they need to be eliminated as well. The squad headed towards the border, but there was a problem. If they found out that Kori was half-orc, trouble could start. Yuri had ordered Hernando to keep an eye on Kori, though, so he didn't think there should be any problems. Yuri called Gerald over to him and said that from now on, he is in charge of scouting. Yuri will tell him where to go and check it out. If the squad gets close to the horde of monsters, they will just run away. And this way there will be a chance for the squad to catch the horde off guard. They would have to chase the horde one way or another. They were interfering with the merchants near the border. Gerald was hesitant, but Yuri said he couldn't give the task to others, and he was too young and inexperienced. Plus, Gerald is a genius when it comes to sword fighting. Yuri is very good with Gerald. He just likes to take him everywhere. Yuri asked Sir Raymond what he was fighting for, to which Sir Raymond gave him a rather boring answer for the safety of Betrayal. When Yuri rushed over to check on Gerald, One of the bandits was already tied up behind him. It looked like the bandit was patrolling the neighborhood alone, and there was a bandit camp not far from this place. Hanging around the bandit's neck was a necklace with a red stone. Their leader said to wear them when they went on patrol. The necklace looked like some kind of artifact, but the bandit didn't know what spell the necklace had. Well, there was nothing to be done about it. Yuri would have to personally catch the leader and find out everything from him. Yuri ordered his men to set up their camp on the retreat path of the bandit group. He also ordered to send some scouts to find out the enemy's fighting strength. If Yuri caused chaos, the others could deal with the fleeing enemies. Yuri rushed off and told everyone to follow him as soon as possible. If they were late, there would be no one left to fight. Yuri stormed into the enemy camp alone, and one by one defeated the entire camp, leaving them no chance to escape. When Yuri's subordinates rushed to the bandits' camp, it was too late. They were too late. The enemies were already tied up. Yuri offered to take all the bandits' meat and cook dinner. They would have a kebab tonight. Tonight they would stay at the bandit camp. And tomorrow they will go onward, by the way the next destination Gid. Before they arrive Balshad, where all allied forces are gathered, they will most likely face the army of another country in Gid. That army will be the army of the Holy Kingdom, a country that uses the Holy Scriptures. If Briol can find common ground with them, the Holy Kingdom army will be able to heal Briol's unit. That's not exactly what Sir Raymond said. He heard that this time the commander of the allied forces was a princess of the Holy Kingdom. But there are rumors that because she lost the battle for the throne, she is desperately trying to get some results to strengthen her position. So now no one knows what she can do in this battle. We need to find out more about her. But Yuri took responsibility for that and said that he would meet with her and find out more about her. Gathering place of the allied forces. The city of the pass for travelers heading to Balshad Gid. This town was responsible for supplying the allied forces. If you mess up here, you will be judged by the laws of Gid if you are found guilty. Yuri has instructed Sir Raymond to see that all their men are trained in manners before allowing them into the city. Gid is an isolated town and their rules will have to be followed. Yuri himself went to meet the Lord. It was a great honor for the Lord to meet the Prince of Briol. When the king of Briola was very young, he made a name for himself on killing orcs. The orcs should flee in the strass since the Prince of Briol is here now, said the Lord. His aide came to the Lord and whispered in his ear that the princess of the Holy Kingdom had arrived in town. When the princess entered the hall, she outshone everyone with her radiance. She was the second princess of the Holy Kingdom, Sibylla Arsant. Lord Gidda warmly greeted the Holy Kingdom Princess Sibylla, and Prince Yuri sat on the sofa like this while the greeting took place. Sibylla noticed Prince Yuri, but she thought that he was the Lord's servant. She said that the Lord's servant needed to get out of here. She had something to discuss with the Lord, so he should leave them alone. When Lord Gid wanted to say it wasn't a servant, one of the knights yelled at him. He asked for silence when the princess was speaking. And this insolent servant also dares to just sit there. He should show the princess respect. But when Yuri said that he was the third prince of Briole, Princess Sibylla and her servants froze. Just like that, Yuri said that he was not only the prince of Briole, but also in charge of the forces of Briole. The prince said it was his own fault. He should have dressed properly, for now he looked more like a homeless hobo from the streets. Princess Sibylla felt very ashamed of herself and her servants, and asked Yuri for forgiveness. Sibylla sat next to the prince, and he kept teasing with questions if he really looked like a homeless man in those clothes. The princess asked him to stop. Yuri offered to start introductions again. He too greeted Sibylla warmly and introduced himself to her again, grabbing her hand. The prince asked how old Sibylla was. She said 20, and he was only 18. Only 2 years difference. Now they could be friends. In that case, we can go without formalities. Yuri and Sibylla were very nice to get to know each other. How wonderful. It's always good to make connections before a battle with orcs. Yuri asked where her troops were. He hadn't seen any other troops on the way here. Sibylla came here first with her knights. Sibylla not willingly replied that her main troops were 1 day's ride away and would arrive in Gid tomorrow. Yuri tried to be gracious and said that she hoped her troops would be fine. The Holy Kingdom has very strict military laws. Does he think anything can go wrong with them? Asked Sibylla. But Yuri was referring to situations from outside. Sometimes orcs go beyond the border, and despite their size, they are very good at ambushes. In general, there should be no problems after all. They are the troops of the Holy Kingdom, although orcs and evil creatures. A little later, Yuri was already walking around the castle with Hernando and taking in the sights. Hernando asked what the Knights of the Holy Kingdom were like, to which Yuri replied that they were too old-fashioned. The princess must have a hard time with them. Hernando asked if Yuri saw something good in the princess. It looks like Yuri is chewing over her. Yuri replied that definitely Sevilla is definitely a very nice girl. A little strict, but there is no way in their business without that. The Prince of Betrayal took out of his pocket the pendant he had torn from the bandit's neck and asked Hernando if it was true that he had bought it in this market. Hernando replied that he was absolutely sure of it. Only here could they sell such things. Yuri is more than sure that he then said that with this pendant, you can bait orcs. To be more precise, the bandit said that once the orcs smell this pendant, they will furiously attack the owner of the pendant. This pendant is some kind of battle drug, so it's an artifact, but it's too fragile. While Yuri and Hernando were walking through the market, they saw Briol's soldiers entering a bar to gamble. Yuri became incensed. The Briol soldiers are gambling. He must not allow that to happen. They can't be considered a proper force while such shameful things are happening in their ranks. At this time, at the other end of the castle, Sibylla met with the deputy captain of the Knights of the Holy Kingdom, Fennec, told her that the meeting went well. Fennec told her that the third prince of Briol can't be trusted. How can he lead people? He thinks it's just a belief that Briol is a kingdom of knights. Sibylla immediately stopped Fennec's conversation by pointing out that you can't talk behind people's backs. She was becoming displeased with this conversation. Fennec asked what he said wrong. Yuri was dressed like some kind of mercenary. To what he heard, the prince was not behaving appropriately. When this whole orc thing is over, Briol will have one less prince, Fennec thought. The princess stopped this conversation again and asked how the main troops were doing. Fennec said it was fine, and they separated. Fennec headed just to the inn where the Knights of Briol were and were gambling. He thought they were just like their captain. This is unforgivable. He wouldn't just sit back and watch all this. Fennec started yelling at Briol's soldiers. What are they even doing? Do they think they came here just to gamble? Fennec said it was none of his business, but he couldn't just watch such inappropriate behavior. The Prince of Briol, Yuri, appeared behind him and asked what Fennec had said about the Knights of Briol, and asked him to introduce himself. Fennec was very surprised to hear the voice and see Prince Yuri behind his back as he wanted to teach his soldiers a lesson. He immediately apologized to Prince Yuri for shouting. But this attitude is not only hurting Yuri and his soldiers, Fennec explained. It seems the knights in Briol still don't know, but what they should be holding is a sword, not a map, Fennec said. As he did so, he also started talking about how he wasn't sure if anyone in Briol had ever held a sword in their hands, mocking the soldiers and the prince. Yuri repeated his question. He asked again what this knight's name was. Doesn't the military discipline of the Holy Kingdom have ranks and orders? At this moment, the Princess of the Holy Kingdom Sevilla enters the inn, asking what is going on here. Sir Fennec, didn't you leave on patrol? Fennec immediately apologized to the princess and ordered his men to go outside and wait for the princess there. Sibylla moved closer to Prince Yuri and apologized to him for her subordinate's restlessness. Yuri replied that he shouldn't have apologized for it. The girl complained that it was very difficult to control all her subordinates. Probably you need to be a holy monarch for that. The princess turned around and started to leave, saying that she would apologize and pay her debt to the prince another time, to which Yuri replied that yes, another time. Yuri remembered Raymond's words, that the princess was in a difficult and weakened position in the power struggle, so she was sensitive to her results. But the prince decided that for everything else, the princess's struggle for power and position was none of his business. While Prince Yuri stayed behind to play in the inn with his soldiers, Fennec was waiting for the princess outside. He asked the princess if she was already friends with the Prince of Briol, to which the princess replied that it was none of his business. Sir Fennec went on again about telling the princess that Yuri had no grace. Suddenly, a battered warrior rode up to the princess on a white horse. He apologized for interrupting the conversation, but he had a message from the rest of the forces. The knight told her that the rest of the forces of the Sacred Kingdom had been attacked by orcs. The princess very quickly packed for the journey. Lord Gidda asked her why she was leaving so quickly, and why she would not ask for help from the Knights of Briol. That way she could minimize the damage to her forces and allies. It would be the best solution. Fennec came into the conversation again, saying that the Sacred Kingdom will take care of its own affairs. Or does the Lord mean they will lose to some dastardly orcs? Princess Sibylla told the Lord not to worry. Everything will end without a problem, though she appreciates the Lord's concern for her. The princess and her subjects rushed away. The Sacred Kingdom is very stubborn, especially this deputy commander, but it can't be helped. The Lord ordered his subject to visit the camp of Briol's troops and meet with the prince. He must hurry. Time is short. The Lord delivered a message to Prince Yuri that the troops of the Holy Kingdom had been attacked by orcs. Also, the Lord asked Prince Yuri to help in destroying the orcs nearby, as they are members of the Allied forces. Raymond didn't understand why Gid was asking for this, and not the Holy Kingdom, to which Yuri replied that he was sure that someone was being too stubborn, meaning Fennec. Yuri ordered Raymond to gather his troops and prepare to leave. We need to help the Allies deal with the orcs. And Roy, the knight who brought the message, Yuri ordered him to go to the bar near the market and call the Knights of Briol from there. Yuri also told Roy that if he said he would take the first 10 men, they would all run out of the bar. As Roy rode off to summon the others, Yuri decided it was time to go out into the night. When the squad was ready, they rode to Princess Sevilla's aid, but it seemed many were still drunk after the bar. Gerald didn't look well, as if he was sick or seasick on horseback. The prince was amused to see this. Roland admired Yuri again. He not only asked the knight who insulted him, but also reached out to save their army. Roland also thought that there was no need to stoop as low as they did. He admired Yuri's deep insight and his vision of the big picture. The prince thought Roland that always been like this. He is very different from how he was in his past life, for that matter, and Yuri is different from that prince in the past. Suddenly there was movement ahead. It was the Knights of the Holy Kingdom. Everyone needs to focus. This is their first battle against the orcs. From now on, Yuri would be the first to enter the battlefield and would be the last to leave it. Yuri Briol, the third prince of Briol and commander of the soldiers of Briol, do not surrender and do not die. These are the prince's orders.